Welcome to another change-making conversation from Baptist News Global. You're listening to a special podcast series titled Highest Power, Church and State, featuring writer, poet, and musician Rick Pidcock. Now here's Rick.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 153 of Highest Power, Church and State. I'm your host, Rick Pidcock, and I wanted to start off today by mentioning Catherine Stork. Many of you may not know her name, but she does the artwork for every episode. She creates the promo images, she puts together the reels, and I'm really bad at those things, and none of this stuff would look nearly as good as it does if it wasn't for her. And she's been working for BNG since the very beginning of Highest Power Church and State. But she's going to be going to law school, and so she's no longer going to be doing this for BNG anymore. And so I wanted to just start off by thanking her for all the work she's done behind the scenes to promote Highest Power Church and State, and wish her well on her way. Also, BNG does already have someone who is going to be replacing her, so you probably won't notice too much of a transition there, but I just wanted to start off by thanking Catherine for the work she's done. So, Christian nationalism is a big tent with a lot of different rooms, and today I'm going to be talking with Reverend Kate Penney Howard about one of those rooms, a rather interesting room that you may not have heard of before. Howard is an ordained minister with a Master of Divinity from Christian Theological Seminary in Indianapolis. She lives near Fort Wayne, Indiana. She's a professional genetic genealogist and speaker and author of When Family History Hurts, Secrets, Silence, and Healing. And she and I are friends on Facebook, and she made a post about these Christian nationalist men who are creating tradwife complementarian polygyny posts. And we'll define what that is in the interview. It's essentially complementarian men who have multiple wives that cater to their every need. But I was going to comment on her post because I get a lot of these types of memes as well on my news feed. And when I went to comment, she'd already tagged me in a comment on her post. So we decided to sit down and have a conversation about it. You posted a status over the weekend about how you feel like the algorithm is hating you because you're seeing nothing but tradwife, complementarian, and polygyny posts. So before we get into some of the particular memes, what do you mean by tradwife, complementarian, and polygyny?
Sure. So polygyny is simply a more specific term of polygamy, which we are, pretty well aware of if we've looked at history. And polygyny just means multiple wives. Polyandry is another term that we're not encountering in this particular phenomenon, which is a woman having multiple husbands. Tradwife is something that really, I think, has gone under the radar. We've always had crunchy people in society. We love them. We embrace them. We need them, right? They do crafts. They make wonderful, home cooking, canning, things like that. I might be described sometimes as a traditional arts and sciences expert, right? I can cook from scratch. I have a garden. I love canning. I can sew. All of these, traditionally typical feminine skills, I've at least explored them. And but that's not what a tradwife is. A tradwife is somebody who is basically living the Little House on the Prairie existence, and they're not Amish. And so we see them a lot on, TikTok, and they're, baking bread in their whole, Little House on the Prairie getup, and it's very cute, and it seems very peaceful and quiet, but it's I think more sinister than the presentation gives us. And then the third question that you asked about complementarianism. So there are two kind of opposing theories of how a relationship traditionally between a man and a woman is. So back in the day, women were expected to submit to their husbands, to have children, and to keep a house. And that was pretty much the woman's job, to support the man in whatever his particular endeavor was, whether it was his work or his church activity, etc. Then we also have egalitarianism, and egalitarianism is simply equal. That's what egal means, right? So an equal. So in the first, the woman complements the husband. She is his ultimate accessory. She's there to keep track of his schedule and remind him to take his medicine and, you know, clean up his messes and take care of his children. So in an egalitarian relationship, we share everything. And I would assume from what I know about you that you and your spouse are in an egalitarian relationship. My husband and I are best friends. We do everything together. I We do construction projects together. He runs the saw and I do the electrical wiring, and he does the plumbing. Well, there's practical reasons why we each do all of those things. I'm not somebody who's been zapped by electricity, so I don't fear the electricity, but also my hands are smaller than his, so I can reach into the junction box and he can't. And in the same aspect, I don't have the upper arm strength to disconnect plumbing, attachments. And so he does that part. And so we'll often call the other person in and say, I need you to do this. I can't, for whatever reason, do this. And then we do things together. I happen to handle all of the finances. I come from a finance background, so that's, it's not a problem for me to do that. My husband is very good at remembering things, and after I had chemo, my brain is just a squirrel. And so my husband is following me around and saying, did you take your medicine? Did you do this? Did you do that? And so, we take care of each other mutually. And I think the big problem between complementarianism and egalitarianism is, in a complementarian relationship, I have no responsibility for what goes wrong. So, if something goes wrong, well, God and my husband are to blame, not me. And so that's, it's a very oppressive and very problematic relationship that often leads to abuse. And even if you're not being physically abused, financial abuse and emotional abuse are real.
Yeah, it's really interesting from my perspective because I'm also a stay-at-home dad.
Yeah.
And so for the first 15 years or so of our marriage, I worked and she worked at the beginning until we had kids, and then, she stayed home and would be considered, we were in a complementarian marriage at that point, and she did all the cooking and everything. But when we changed our theology and then changed our careers and I ended up becoming a stay-at-home dad, it's kind of like you start to see when the roles are reversed, some of the how absurd this is. Like if I had to make sure I was well dressed and perfectly shaven every time she came in the house and had the dinner exactly done and timed perfectly, nobody would expect that from me. But
Yeah.
somehow when it's the woman in a complementarian role, but in a more extreme example, the trad wife role that you were talking about, it's expected for the woman to have all that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't even think in our society it really is practical to have a one income household, at least on a factory wage. I mean, there are people who have an education or they're entrepreneurs and they make it big, but on the most part, two teachers need to stay working because you can't live on one teacher's salary anymore.
Hmm.
My husband and I are very, very frugal, and we basically save one income. And so, and it's much easier because our kids are grown. And so I don't even know what my life would be like if I had little kids, to take care of as well. I'd love them, but
Yeah. Yeah, we got five, so it gets a little, hectic.
yeah.
But so you posted a meme originally that kind of caught my attention, and the meme of the that you had posted, it said, "Ladies, is there just too much to do?" And it said, "Are you exhausted, overworked, stressed, too tired for intimacy, too busy for hobbies? Imagine instead shared workload, more rest, less stress, a vibrant marriage, time for yourself again. The solution could be a sister wife. More help, more harmony, more life together." So, before we get into their proposed solution, what are some of the messages you're noticing in that meme about women and marriage, and what are they appealing to in women?
Yeah, they're not appealing to me, so I'm not quite sure. Like I literally look at it and think, what planet is going on here? So the first part is there too much work? It seems so ironic that a man is making this meme asking women if there's too much work to do, and his solution is to get another woman. Well, maybe he should get out from behind his computer and help his wife with the dishes and the laundry.
Yeah, and it's funny because he's also making the meme, it looks like, through AI, so
Oh
that's
yeah,
doing the work for him.
yeah, yeah, yeah. This guy has got Chat GPT and Wife GPT and wife number two GPT apparently. Um, And, you know, I was aware of, polygamy within the early Latter-day Saint movement. I was aware of the fundamentalist LDS groups, Warren Jeffs and other branches, but also, undeniably the Sister Wives show. I watched all of the seasons of Sister Wives, and I watched it because these women without trying, just made such a fool of this narcissist over and over and over again. And I loved watching this guy, you know, get his just desserts. And it, but what we need to see, if we go back and look at it again, is how painful this was for these women. For the one legal wife who did not bear more than one child and suffered for that. And that's an important point that we need to talk about. And then the other two non-legal wives, and then the third non-legal wife came along, and the first wife had to get a divorce so that he could be a guardian to the third wife's children. And then it all got really messy because the dynamics of polygamy require the first wife to have more privilege. And so it just, watching that and how sad it was for the wives and how awful it was for the children, it's not just, oh, look at this stupid narcissist making a fool of himself. It's look at this man ruining 30 people's lives.
Hmm. Interesting. I didn't watch that show, so but I can imagine I've seen a number of things about like the LDS fundamentalists and stuff
Yeah.
like that, so I could see some of that similarities playing out. So like what do these guys propose as the solution? You mentioned it, a sister wife. He said the solution could be a sister wife. Like how exactly does this work in their homes?
So I don't quite know the answer to that question, but I believe that this whole we need to have multiple wives situation is part of the quiverful movement, which is part of Christian nationalism. So, um, some white people in America are very concerned that in a few years, white people will no longer be the majority in the country. And so, replacement theory, is this great boogeyman, which says, we're all going to get replaced and then people are going to treat us the way that we treated people for 300 years. And, that's a fair fear, but it's not something that we should action on, right? And so the quiverful movement is literally repopulating the white population. Are there people who are doing quiverful that are not white? Yes, but for the most part, this is a white problem. And so when you see these people who are like, I need to have all these wives and prove my manliness and have all these kids to prove my manliness and repopulate the white population so we don't get replaced, that, it's very, very insidious. And once again, they're subjecting women in order to make this happen.
And it's always detrimental to the women. It reminds me of
Yes.
there's a Netflix documentary called Inside the Manosphere. It's not a Christian group. It's like these, young male influencers. But one of the things they bring up is this one-sided monogamy where the man gets to be with however many women he wants to, but the women have to be monogamous only to him. And so it's like this entire setup, it's always centered on catering to the men, pleasing the men, obeying the men, providing everything for the men.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the movie Pleasantville. And William H. Macy's character comes into the home after his wife has broken the spell and escaped. And he comes home to a dark house in the rain and he says, "Where's my dinner? Where's my dinner?" And it is literally like the call of these, Theo bros that are, yeah, I mean, go make a sandwich, buddy. It's okay. You'll be okay. A friend of mine commented on that meme. She said, "I think that this is an excellent advertisement for lesbianism." And, that's a great point. Do women even need men anymore? Not
Yeah.
really. I mean, I love my husband, but it's not like the 1950s where I couldn't get a car loan or a house loan without my husband signing it or my daddy signing it.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that stood out to me about some of these memes is they'll talk about how there's so many more women than men and
Yeah,
than good men.
yeah,
And so like you have to have six women, but a woman can't have six men because that would, reverse the numbers. But like six women may need one man, and you're the good man, the one good man that they can all come to. But it's like they're assuming that they're the good one here.
yeah, yeah. And that they're so virile and
Yeah.
so connected to God. And it's very, very, it's very, very confusing as to why they think this is a good idea.
Yeah. So one of the men that has made these memes was a guy named Jason Cook. He brands himself as Lord Redbeard. And there was one meme that he talked about, and this is where like some of the stuff feels kind of out there. Like we watch these Netflix documentaries of these, when the fundamentalist Mormons do this kind of stuff, and it feels a little unrelatable. And he has this meme where he talks about the modern proposal where a man gets down on one knee to ask a woman for her approval for marriage.
Yeah.
And he says, but in biblical marriage is that he stands as a leader, ready to provide, protect, and lead his future wife. A man is called to lead, not to kneel before women. So, like, in one sense, I could see people seeing this and saying, oh, that's a little extreme to criticize a man for getting down on one knee and asking a woman to marry him. But on the other, like, he shares a lot of assumptions with mainstream complementarians here about
Yeah.
men are to provide and protect and lead their wife.
Yeah. And this is just historically illiterate as well, because the whole concept of a man getting down on his knee to propose comes directly from chivalry, and the chivalry were knights. And who is more masculine than a dude who's covered in armor and jousting on a giant war horse? Like, there is nothing more masculine than a medieval knight, right? And so if a medieval knight would bow to the king on one knee and bow to his consort on one knee and bow to God on two knees, then why is it somehow not traditionally masculine today for them to be chivalric?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
One of the other memes I saw from these guys, there was a man there, and he's there with a smile, and he's got these two women around him, and it says, "Want to show true appreciation for all he's done for you? Give him the ultimate gift, another wife, the gift that keeps on blessing, because a grateful wife brings another." What are these memes assuming about men who want to have everything centered on themselves?
I think that these memes are pointed at the question I would want to ask is, are these memes, that one in specific, is it meant to convert men to the movement, or is it meant to recruit new wives? So if I were in a situation where I had been beaten down, I had been abused, betrayed, hard times, and if I was tired, and if I was scrolling through and I saw a meme like that, I might think, oh, yeah, I looked for a man. I had a man and he was trash. And so maybe if I find myself a good, godly man like this one who already has two wives, I could be his third wife and I could bring my, three kids in and we'd have a big family. That's troublesome because it's literally a narcissist recruiting people who are already hurting. And they're going to be much easier to discipline in his structure than somebody who hasn't been abused.
And I think that speaks as well to how it would, like, what kind of men this would attract to something like this.
Right. Yeah, my husband, when I was talking, because I had to tell my husband that I was going to go into the office to talk to a guy I met on the internet about plural wives and stuff, and he like raised his eyebrow. He's like, "Is that what you want to do next?" And I said, "No, but we're just having this
Yeah.
conversation." And so he said, "Good, because I don't want another wife. You're too much already." you know. But I mean, yes, it's funny. I'm going on a trip and he says, "Well, can I just have a hall pass while you're out on a trip?" And I'm like, "Sure, you can sleep with the dog all you want." I mean, we have a very open communication and talk about this sort of thing. And of course, he's seen Sister Wives when I've had it on, and he rolls his eyes at this guy because the guy's not manly by any stretch of the imagination. He's just a narcissist.
Yeah. And I think so, like, you look at some of these things like the Sister Wives, the all the Netflix documentaries, they feel like I think even mainstream complementarians will recognize influencers like this, and they'll recognize the harmful dynamics. They'll see like a guy who wants five women to make his meals and give him sex and clean his house. They'll see how harmful that is. All these women submitting to him. But if you work back from that and just take it down to monogamy, how is their complementarianism any different?
Yeah, that's a good question to mull over. Um, I mean, extreme complementarianism, like a woman doesn't have access to the finances, that would be where I would call the problem. I think that extreme complementarianism is control. And I think that God created women in the image and likeness of God as well, and that, you know, masculinity is not divinity, it's something else.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I think is was helpful is how you've brought this you've connected this to the Christian nationalist conversation, and one of the things that I think is tricky here is Christian nationalists don't have like a monolith on their mindset. And so it's like a puzzle, and there's all these different pieces to the puzzle, and they're very different from one another. And yet there are these common relational shapes that they have. And some of these common fundamental assumptions. And so I know it was more of a social media post that you made, but I appreciated you pointing this out and bringing one more illustration to this conversation that we may not have thought about before. And I appreciate you coming on and sharing your thoughts with us.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. Please like, subscribe, and rate us on your favorite podcast platform. And we'll be back with another episode on Thursday.
This has been another change-making conversation from Baptist News Global. The episode you've just heard is part of a special podcast series titled Highest Power, Church and State. Be sure to follow BNG daily at baptistnews.com and subscribe to get notifications about future episodes. Baptist News Global is a national nonprofit news service that is independent, free, and faithful. BNG is supported by readers and listeners like you. Learn more at baptistnews.com.
This episode was produced and edited by Mac Bowles of TKG Communications, LLC, Dallas, Texas.